Welcome back to Season Liberally. Today we're going to be making a somewhat simplified lasagna bolognese where we cut a little bit of the time, but we still keep that big, amazing flavor. Stick around. All right, so today we're going to make a somewhat, like I say, somewhat simplified version of the lasagna bolognese. Now, this version, it's not something you're gonna wind up making on a Wednesday night unless you get off work at, say, 2 in the afternoon. It's gonna take a couple hours to make. That being said, it's a little shorter amount of time than making a traditional lasagna bolognese, and it still has a lot of great flavor to it. So let's get started. So we're gonna get working on our mise en place. The first thing we have to do is cut up some mirepoix. So we're gonna take 2 pieces of celery, 2 carrots, and 1 nice large onion, and we're gonna dice them. I'm gonna wash these off, and then we're gonna get started cutting. So I'm gonna cut this piece of celery that I just washed. I wanna cut it a little finer than I would just a normal quick mirepoix. I wanna actually dice this up so that it's not, you're not getting a giant chunk of vegetable when you eat your bolognese. Having a little bit of visible sort of carrot or celery is fine, but what I don't want is a whole like half moon of celery in there or a big round of carrot. I'm gonna be dicing up the carrot and the celery so that it's not just a big large chunk. So to do that, we're gonna run our blade directly down the center of the celery here. And then I'm just gonna start cutting down again here, just little bits, running it down so that when I hold it together to dice it, it's smaller pieces than 1 large piece. Now I'm gonna go about four different cuts down the stalk. This is a great opportunity to practice your dice, practice your cuts. Now, as I get, and it gets a little smaller down here, I don't need to go 4 to get the same effect. So there we go. It's not, like, this is not a fine dice, but it's definitely not like a regular chop. And so that's what we want. We want something about that size. Okay, so now when I cut this, I don't want to leave a full circle, like a full piece of carrot that's like left in a circle. I'm gonna quarter this. So I'm gonna go up, you know, about halfway up my carrot, and I'm gonna lever down my knife so that I cut across there. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna find the center, and then I'm just gonna lever down. And then I have, as you can see, 4 pieces that are ready to be cut. And this is and if we cut these small enough, they'll be the perfect size. If it feels like it's still a little too much, we can always run 1 more cut. If we think, wow, that's still a little too big, I can just run 1 more cut through there. But I'm just gonna cut these into little quarter moons, and that should be fine. I'm not gonna go crazy with this. And now when I get to here, I wanna do the same thing. Just half though, and then just cut it along. Get it so it's nice and small-ish. It doesn't have to be the tiniest little piece, but it shouldn't be very large. We are gonna need to dice our onion. Now we're not gonna go crazy on this onion. Like I say, not gonna go too small on the onion, but we are gonna dice it relatively fine. So what I do is I always cut off the top end and keep the root end of the onion, and then just peel back so that I have something to hold on to. And if it's discolored like that, you can always go back 1 more layer. It's not gonna hurt anything, right? And then I'll have something to hold on to. As my hand moves down the onion, I'll have a little piece to hold on to. And that's discolored, we're just getting rid of it. 1 layer down was discolored, so we're gonna do 2 layers. It's a pretty big onion, so it'll be okay. You can use 2 small onions if you don't have 1 big one. Now, I'm doing about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch dice on this. Heel of my palm, cutting across parallel, then perpendicular, and then perpendicular 1 more time. Now, as it gets a little wobbly at the top, I'll sometimes knife off a little piece. There we go. Now I am, as you can see, separating out my mirepoix to my onion and my carrots and celery, and that's because I want the onion to cook just a little longer. I would like it to be translucent before I add my other vegetables, and you'll see later why that's important, but I am separating it out now. Now I'm using 3 nice sized cloves of garlic for this. You can use as many as 4 if you like. You can go down to 2. You don't have to add a garlic at all if you don't want to. So I'm going to nip the root end off of each of these and then just give it a little whack with my side of my knife, and the paper will just fall right off if you take that root end off. Now, with these, I am going to smash them down really good. This garlic's going to be diced up, and it's going to be added well into the mirepoix cook. So it's not going to burn, so we can get it nice and fine. And I'm just going to rock my blade on this for a little bit so I can get it nice and cut down. So you're not going to bite into a bigger piece of garlic in this. This will all melt down, essentially, as you cook. And sometimes it helps if you press down. Like if you use your side of your blade to press down, it'll adhere to the cutting board, and then you can chop like so. What we're also going to need for this is some fresh thyme. Now, if you want to, and if you have a bag for it, you could just drop in a couple of these stems as this cooks. But I'm not going to pull out one of the bags. Instead, I'm just going to use some of this thyme and pull the leaves off. And to do that, you just grab the thyme branch, and then you push. You see how the leaves sprout this way. You want to push the opposite way. Just pull the opposite way, and they should fall right off. And you can use dried thyme in this if you like as well. You use a little less. I'm going to probably use about 2 teaspoons worth of fresh thyme in here. You'll use less if you use dried. About half. And like I say, the stems are a great source of flavor. So if you have a way to get them out of your sauce at the end, feel free to use them. There's lots of different types of steeping contraptions out there, be they steel balls or pieces of cheesecloth. Even tying like a piece of butcher twine around them, as long as you can make sure it's tight, you can then pull them out. So now I got my thyme, which I'm going to roughly chop here very quickly because you don't want to get a big piece of thyme on your teeth when you're eating. So I want to cut it out a little bit here. I'll put this in a small ramekin. And like I say, it's about a teaspoon worth of fresh thyme that's been chopped. All right, one more little piece here. What I have here is some parsley stems. So, as I use parsley, as I use it up, sometimes I'll pull it off the top and I'll leave the stem here. Well, my plan here is to just use some of these stems in this cooking. Parsley stems are perfectly edible. They can be a little woody, so I'm going to chop them up nice and fine. But it's a good way to, stretch your fresh herbs out a little bit. And then, of course, there's a little bit of leaf in here at the very end, which I'm going to cut up. And so you can see there's a little bit of leaf at the top, but it's mostly stem, and that's okay, because this is going to cook for a long time. And as it cooks, the parsley stems will release their flavor. I'm going to put it with my other herbs because all the herbs get added at the same time. And that's an important piece of mise en place, is always trying to think ahead how and when you will be adding your ingredients to your dish. Because You will then group those ingredients based on when they get added. Like I did earlier when I had a difference between my carrots and my onion, I know that I don't want to put it all together as one unit. I'm going to put in the carrots first, I'm going to put in the onion first, then I'm going to put in the carrots and the celery afterwards. So I should separate it out before I get to that step. So it's little pieces like that that help you become a lot more efficient in the kitchen. So I had to change out my cooktop. I was having some real problems with some interference with that microphone because it's a wireless microphone that leads to this lav mic. And so when I was using the induction top, it was just, there was a ton of interference and the mic itself would just cut out for large stretches. So when you're watching some of my videos that were recorded before this, and you see the induction cooktop, there's a possibility that some of the mics that I'm using are not that mic that I should be using. Instead, I'm using like a mic from my other cameras and things because it wound up just cutting out. So hopefully that problem is fixed, but this will probably be, this is a brand new cooktop that I have to use here instead. So it's nice and hot. I'm gonna add some oil to it, just about 2 tablespoons of oil. We may be adding more oil as it goes on or taking some oil out, depending on how fatty our meat is. So we're just adding our onion to this. I'm going to toss it around a little in there. Now, I'm going to add a little salt to this. I'm not seasoning it to, I'm not salting it to season. I am actually just throwing a little salt on there so it helps break down the cell walls a little bit. And I'll do that to my other vegetables as well, but what I want is I want the onion itself to start to break down and turn translucent. And so I just add a little bit of salt to help that process along. Now I don't want to brown the onion here, so I am going to keep it moving. Now the name of the game for this whole dish, everything we do from this point on, is going to be trying to remove the moisture from everything we're cooking. So the onion, we want to get the moisture out. The carrot, celery, get the moisture out. The beef, the pork, remove the moisture. Every single thing that we cook from this point on in this ragu, it's just trying to concentrate flavors. We're trying to take all the flavors that we put in it and concentrate them down. We're going to add milk to this. We're going to add wine to this. We're going to reduce that down to nothing. And we're just going to take the essence of that liquid and flavor our sauce. So just remember, you want to try to make sure that in each step, things are dry. And that's why this recipe takes a long time, is because it takes a while to get the water out of everything while not burning it. The onion's been cooking for about 5 minutes. We're going to add in our celery and carrots. Looks like there's enough oil in here. I don't have to add any extra oil. I'll toss that celery and carrots in here, and we're just going to cook it down. I'm going to hit this with a little salt, just a touch. Okay, so carrots are starting to get soft, celery's starting to turn translucent. Now it's time to add my garlic. And I don't want to cook this for too long. Just stir it in there a little bit. Minute, maybe a minute, that's about it. Once you add the garlic, you're going to smell it right away, right? It's going to get real aromatic initially. Just cook it for a little bit, maybe about a minute. Like I say, you don't want to go too long. You don't want to burn the garlic. All right. To this, I'm going to be adding a pound of ground pork and a pound of ground beef. Now, if you use really fatty ground beef, you're going to probably want to pull some of the fat that comes off of this. It's because it's gonna be pretty fatty and it'll pool on top. You can try to pull some of that off of there. The pork may be fatty as well, and so you're gonna want to pull some of that, any of that fat, like really obvious fat, if there's any on there, you want to get it out of here. You don't want to have that fat in there because that's gonna be an off flavor. So just watch it once it cooks. Now we are not trying to brown this. It's going to be gray when it's finished. That's okay. We are just trying to get it so it's warm, right? So it cooks itself through and it starts to release the water. That's important, right? We want it to release the water. So I'm just going to break it down, smash it down with my spatula to try to break it into little pieces. And then I'm just going to cook it. I'm just going to let it cook. Cook this down until all of it is 100% cooked and it doesn't look like there's water coming off of it. That's probably going to take about 15 minutes. You see that water? You see how that water that's sort of just pooling down here? You can see that there's a lot of water in here still. We're getting rid of all that. We're going to cook until this is dry. So we're going to let this just keep going. Keep it on nice high heat, you know. When you're cooking the mirepoix, you want to be at like a medium, but once you get up to this and there's a lot of different material in the bowl in the pan here, you can put this up to pretty high. So you can go high heat, medium high on this, and you'll be fine. You shouldn't burn it. At this point, the meat is cooked, right? But what we want to do is we want to cook out all this steam. Do you see the steam that's floating up? You want to get rid of all that steam, and we want to make sure that we separate out all that oil. Because inside of this water down here is a bunch of oil, and we want to get rid of any of the oil if there's excess oil in here. So we're just going to keep cooking it till it's dry. And you can see a lot of that is fat, right? We got a lot of fat in the bottom of this. And so to get it out of here, I pushed all the beef that I could and the pork into one side, right? And if you want, you can press that down a little, right? And then I'm just going to tilt it so I have access with a spoon, and I'm going to spoon out any of this fat that I can. If you're brave, you could just tilt the whole thing over. I have many times in my life thought I was smarter than the pan, and I tried to tilt it over, and what happened to me was I dumped a bunch of ground beef into my fat tray. So now I just use a spoon. And now I don't have to get all this out, right? It doesn't, I mean, if there's a little fat in here, it's going to be okay. I got most of it, right? There's a tiny little bit left over, but look at how much I got, right? I got a ton of that fat out of there. That's what you want to do. All right. My ground beef and ground pork and mirepoix have cooked. They are ready for the first reduction. The first reduction is a dry white wine. We are going to find a dry white wine. Do not use a sweet white wine like a Riesling or something, would not work. Use a dry white, something that is sour. And then I'm going to pour that in. Now this is 1.5 cups. I'm going to pour it in. It's going to come to a boil, and then it's just going to cook off. This is going to take 15, 20 minutes. Just let it go. Put it on medium-high heat and let it run. Once you hear it start to snap again and it's not bubbling, you'll know it's ready to come back. We're going to reduce this down to what they call au sec. Au sec means almost dry. And that's what we're going to do. Let all this flavor from the wine concentrate into the meat. Okay. You can see it's mostly gone, right? When I pull across and you don't see it start to fill up, you know it's mostly gone. Almost dry, as they say, au sec. And you can smell there's now a wine flavor along with that sort of cooked meat flavor, which is just wonderful. So what's next? Well, we're going to do the same thing again, but this time we're going to add 1.5 cups of whole milk to it. And again, now we're just going to remove all the water from that milk, get those milk solids to bond with this meat and to make it nice and tasty. So this is going to boil right out. Again, you can get this nice and hot on your stove, get it so all that water boils out of this. It's going to take 15, 20 minutes. All right, it's mostly dry. This is exactly where we want to be. These two reductions are going to add a ton of flavor to this meat. And so we will only have to cook it now, probably about another 20 to 25 minutes, depending. But what we have to do now is we have to add some tomato paste. So I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons worth of tomato paste to this. And I'm just going to stir this in. I want to cook this for about maybe 2 minutes on high heat, get it so that the pasty flavor sort of is gone from the tomato paste. We're just going to let it go. Okay, I want to salt and pepper a little bit now, so I'm going to hit it with maybe a teaspoon of salt right now just to see where it's at. Drop a little pepper in here now at this point. I'm gonna finally, like when this is ready to be put in the lasagna, I will taste it to see what it tastes like and if it needs to be seasoned. There's a lot of salt layers in this though, because you're gonna have this, the bechamel itself is gonna be seasoned, and then you're gonna have Parmesan cheese. So there's gonna be a lot of different salt layers in here. So you don't wanna over salt one of your components. It could ruin the whole dish. So we're gonna see what it tastes like when it's completed, but I just wanted to add a little bit of salt right now so that it cooks with it. All right, that's cooked for a couple minutes. I'm going to add a full can of crushed tomatoes to this and maybe about a quarter cup of water. I'm going to run some water in here and swirl it around and get all the good bits out of here. It's about a quarter cup of water extra. Okay, I'm going to stir that up. Okay, now we are going to add our herbs. We're going to go directly in. I'm going to stir it. Let those herbs stir in. And now we are just going to let this come up to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, we're going to set it to a simmer, and we're going to let it cook for about 20 minutes. We're going to put a cover on it, though, because this is about the consistency that we want. Now we're done losing water, okay? We don't want to lose any more water. We want to keep the water in here. So as you can see, it's starting to bubble. It's going to bubble all over. It's going to boil, and then I'm going to put a cover on it, and I'm going to turn it down to a simmer and let it simmer 20-25 minutes. All right, now it's time to make our bechamel. Our bechamel is going to be our glue in this recipe. And the ratio for bechamel is normally 1 tablespoon of butter to 1 tablespoon of flour to 1 cup of milk. That's normally the ratio, and that's what we're using today, but except for we're gonna make 4 times the amount. So we have a quarter cup of butter or 4 tablespoons, quarter cup of flour, and then 4 cups of whole milk. So when you make bechamel, you got to make a roux, and so that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our butter in our pan and just melt it down, right? We want to get it so it's almost all the way melted, and we don't want to burn the butter. We don't want to scorch the butter, and we don't want to burn it. We want it to be white. We're making a white roux for a white sauce. If you were going to make a different colored roux, say a brown roux, that would be used in something like etouffee, which is a Cajun sauce, and so you would use that in that particular preparation. You wouldn't want to brown the butter in this, but roux can be brown. The thickening power of roux also goes down the more you brown it, so that's something to remember. This thickens this sauce at sort of a perfect level. So the 1 to 1 to 1, tablespoon cup ratio really does well for this particular version of the sauce. This is not a very flavorful sauce. It is really there to add moisture, the moisture that you took out, but this time you're adding like a thick richness and a moisture to it, and you're adding a glue layer so that your lasagna doesn't just fall apart. We're putting cheese on top of this when we construct the lasagna, so it's all going to stay together in one unit. And so that's why you want to have a nice thick bechamel for this. And something that's not like super flavored. We're not making an Alfredo sauce. Okay, so the butter's melted. I'm going to add my flour and I'm going to stir it. Now I'm not going to stir it for very long. I'm only going to stir it for, maybe a minute, minute and a half. I'm not trying to brown it like I said. What I want to do is I want to just cook a little bit of that starch out of it. And you're going to smell like a nutty sort of smell, and you'll know it's close. Just going to keep on it. Get in the corners, and if you want to get in the corners, you can use the palm of your hand and just push your whisk around in a circle, and it'll get those corners. All right, I'm starting to smell this sort of aromatic butter smell, right? That's what you want to smell. All right. If you have a hot roux, you add a cold liquid. If you have a cold liquid, you add a hot roux. Okay? That's what we're doing today. Cold liquid, hot roux. If you were going to try to take a bit of sauce, a bit of stock that was warm, you wouldn't want to add a hot roux to it because there's a chance it can lump up, okay? You always go with the opposite. So cold liquid, hot roux. Here we go. And I'm just stirring it, just going to incorporate it, okay? And then I'm going to bring this to a boil, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to stir it, occasionally. I'm not going to keep on it, and I'm not going to go crazy on it. I'm going to stir it, and then let it come to a boil, and it's going to start to thicken. So why do we make a roux? Well, we want to thicken this up, and we want to use flour as a thickener. But if I were to just dump a bunch of flour in milk, it would clump, right? It would turn into a big clump, and you would find a bunch of big clumps in your sauce, and that's not appetizing. So you use a thickener that will disappear, or at least not be noticeable, and will thicken the liquid that way. We want to use flour, so what we do is we coat all those individual particles of flour with an equal amount of butter, so that each piece of flour, each piece of starch in there is now coated. So when it does touch the liquid, it doesn't all seize up and go together. Instead, it flows apart and separates. And then as it cooks, that starch expands, and that's what thickens our sauce. And the butter basically prevents it from lumping. We've all had terrible sauces, right? You've had a lumpy sauce. It's unappetizing. It's starting to thicken. You can tell it's starting to thicken. It's starting to bubble around the outside. And when I stir it, there's a sheen on the liquid now, and you can see that sheen as you stir it. It's not 100% up to snuff yet, but as you can see, it's starting to coat a spoon, and that's how you know your bechamel is thickening up. We got to keep cooking this until it starts coming to a boil. It's got to actually boil. Okay, we can sort of see it start to boil here. You can see it start to boil, and now it's pushing up and it's creating bubbles, right? And as it starts creating these bubbles, this may actually flow over. So you got to be careful and you got to watch it. Don't walk away from this, because you're going to wind up with a bunch of bechamel on your stove, and that's not fun to clean off. All right, it is now boiling, right? You can see it moving. And it's a nice thickness, but it's got to cook for a little while, about 10 minutes. What we're going to do is we're going to turn this heat down low, and we're going to let it simmer for 10 minutes. The other sauce has about 10 more minutes to go. Then I'm going to shut them both off, and I'm just going to let them sit for about 15, 20 minutes covered so that they will cool down enough for me to make and construct the lasagna. So this is going to cook on a low heat. We're going to turn it down nice and low, and then we're just going to let it go for 10 minutes. All right, so what does this look like? Just took it off the heat. It is cooked for 25 minutes. It looks great. Look at how red that is, how pretty that looks. And as you can see, you might get a little tiny piece of carrot on there, but it's not a giant piece of carrot, which is exactly what you're looking for. All right, so I need the lid because I am going to put the lid back on here in a minute. But what I have to do is I have to season it. This has got to taste, it's got to be properly seasoned because each layer of this has to have proper seasoning. So we have to taste this right now and see what it tastes like, and if we think it needs more salt and pepper, we're going to add now. Needs salt. And I think it could use a couple of cracks of pepper too. All right. Let's try that, see how that tastes. All right, tiniest touch more salt. And this is ready to go. This is seasoned properly. And I'm gonna let this sit on my counter off the heat for about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm probably gonna lean towards 15 minutes because I don't wanna burn myself when I'm putting the lasagna together. It doesn't have to be boiling hot. All right, here's our bechamel sauce. It looks nice and creamy, and we cooked a little bit of that liquid off, right? We spent some time, 10 minutes or so. It cooked a little bit of that liquid off. This has got to have some flavor too. Now, we did not add any salt and pepper, so before I even go, I'm gonna add a little salt to this. And now you can use white pepper if you think it looks unappetizing, have black specks in here. But as we construct the lasagna, you won't notice those black specks because it's just gonna be mashed together. So I don't mind black pepper in this bechamel. It doesn't bother me. All right. Stirred it up, let's give it a shot, see what it tastes like. Perfect, doesn't need anything. Okay. So now, I'm gonna let this sit for about 10 or 15 minutes alongside the ragu, but this will develop a skin if I just let it sit out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a little piece of press and seal. I'm gonna press it down on top and have it touch the liquid itself, okay? So as you can see, it's all covered, but it's touching the liquid itself. When I pull this off, I'll squeeze out all the bechamel, and it will not have contact with the air, so it won't have a skin on it, and it won't have lumps in it. So I'm gonna put this on the counter and let it sit for 15 minutes. Okay, so I am going to start constructing the lasagna very soon, but I need to do a couple things first. Now, when we construct the lasagna, the noodles, they say in the package that they fit across, 3 across, right? And as you can see, there's still a lot of space on one side. So I normally don't do that. I normally actually put 4 noodles in and I break it. But these will just shatter if I break it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this pan up with water as hot as I can get it from the tap. I'm going to lay in 20 no-boil noodles. These are bakeable noodles. And I'm just going to let it sit for a minute, minute and a half, just so that they can soften a little bit so when I snap it, it won't shatter and fly all over the place. So I'm gonna get some hot tap water and put these into this. This is 20 sheets. Now you can just use 15 if you like, you can just use 15. I also like to get wet, even if I'm just using 15, I like to get them started because we took a lot of moisture out of this lasagna and there's not an excess amount of water in here, a ton of water. And so I like to make sure that these are a little damp when I put them in. So hot tap water, 20 noodles. All right, these sat for about a minute, and I'm gonna pull them out and just try to dry them off as best I can, you know, laying them on here, making sure that they're gonna dry off just a little. I don't want them sopping wet if I can avoid it. And I wanna separate them out so they don't stick together if I can. Now I know this feels like a lot of work, right? It's worth it. This lasagna is excellent. All right, we're gonna get started now. So, we have a pan. Now this is non-stick, but I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of this non-stick spray. I don't want it to stick, you know, sticking lasagna is the worst. So we're just gonna hit it with some non-stick spray real quick. I have a big ladle for my ragu, which is still warm. You can see it's still steaming, but it's not burning hot. I also have my bechamel, which I will slide in, and as you can see, it does not have a skin on it, which is great, exactly where we want to be. So, I have an offset spatula here that I'm going to be using, and I'm also going to be using a spoon to spread some things out. So we're going to get started. Okay, so we need, you know, a little ladleful of bechamel and a nice ladleful of meat sauce in the bottom, okay? In the bottom here, we want to make sure that the entire bottom is covered, okay? All right, Bottom's nice and covered. Here we go. 3 sheets. 1, 2, 3. And then I break one. I just snap it like this, right in half, and I lay the other piece here. Okay? 3 sheets. Onto that, 1 scoop, 1 nice big batch of Ragu. Okay? And I'm just going to spread this out. We're going to get it nice and spread out all over as much as we can. And if it looks like it's not enough, right? It looks like it's not enough, add a little more, right? You want it to cover it. You want it to cover it in a nice layer. It's not going to cover it completely, right? You only have so much of this. But if it looks like it's a little light in one area or another, throw a little bit in here. On top of this is 1 nice ladle of bechamel, okay? And I'm just going to work my way across. Nice little ladle of bechamel here. And I'm going to use my offset spatula here to sort of spread this in. I want to get a nice thin layer of this. I don't want it to goop up if I can avoid it. I want to get a nice thin layer. You don't want to be biting into this and get a big piece of bechamel, not appetizing, okay? I have Parmesan cheese. This is Parmesan cheese, 2 cups that I shredded, okay? And this is Parmigiano Reggiano. You can buy some of that stuff in the bag. I'm not crazy about the stuff that's already shredded in the bag. I like to shred my own cheese. So, you know, this is a small handful worth. I want to save most of it for the top, right? But I want to have cheese on each layer. That's 1 layer. We've got to do that 5 times. So, I move it to the other side this time. And we break this piece, like so. There we go, nice, beautiful. We're going to add another layer. And I try to do some of the work with my ladle, right? I try to do some of the heavy lifting of the bechamel, moving it around with my ladle before I actually touch my offset spatula. And the key is to try to keep it even, right? You want it to grow. As it grows, you want it to stay even and level all the way up. So you don't want to just like have like a bunch of your meat on one side. And I use a spoon to move this around because it's just a little easier than the offset spatula. Offset spatula is great for, you know, things that are like liquidy or frosting like, but this is a little too robust to be moving around, at least for me. But if, you know, use whatever tool works for you. Okay, our last layer. We put our noodles on. Break this last one. Now on the top, I like to go a couple of ladles, right? 2 ladles worth of this stuff. A lot of meat on top, right? We want to make sure that this last layer, this one's the one you really want to cover, right? You really want to spend as much time and spread as much as you can covering with this last layer. So I just put 2 ladles, and that's like 2.5 ladles worth on top here. And look, I still have a little left over in here. I could put a little more in here if I want. But I think that's enough, right? That looks good. There's no spaces in here that are white. We've covered the noodles completely. Everything is covered all the way down, right? Really nice look here. Now we're gonna add bechamel, and I'm gonna do like a couple of ladles worth, right? Probably 2 ladles worth, and we'll see what it looks like. We're just going to spread this out, try to get a nice bechamel covering all the way across the whole lasagna. I need a little more. All right. That's 3 ladles worth, so looking good. I want it to go over to the sides if I can. Get it over to the sides, you know? Get it all the way over. Get it so it looks nice. All right. Rest of my cheese. This is about 3/4 of a cup, right? So I used only about 1/4 cup for each of the other layers. I'm just spreading this cheese all the way across the top. Okay, we're going to put this in the oven now. The oven was preheated to 400 degrees convection. That's 425 still oven. I have a piece of foil here. This is going to cook at 400 convection for about 30 minutes. I want to cover it with tin foil for that first part because I don't want it to overcook and I don't want it to brown. Now, I'm going to spray a little bit of cooking spray on this to make sure it doesn't stick to the top. You can, if you like, use a little olive oil, rub that in there. You can put some butter on there, whatever you want to do, whatever kind of lubrication you want to put on here so it doesn't stick to this, whatever makes you happy, put that on there. This is going to go in the oven, middle rack, 425 degrees still oven, 400 degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes. Then I'm going to take the top off, turn the oven up 25 degrees, let it cook for 10 to 15 more minutes till it gets a lot of nice color on it. So let's go put this in the oven and get started. All right. Feast your eyes on that. Looking pretty good, but it's stupid hot. So we're gonna let it sit for about 15 minutes. It's gotta meld a little. It's not gonna get cold. We're gonna use a little piece of foil, cover over the top, leave it alone. And 15 minutes later, we're gonna cut into it. All right, 15 minutes. We tented some foil over the top. And we have our lasagna. Look at how pretty. Okay. I'm gonna cut it. Now I like a nice sized piece of lasagna. Your mileage may vary. You may make a smaller piece, larger piece. I normally cut my lasagna into 12. This is a 13 by 9 pan, so you may make a decision to cut it into smaller pieces or larger pieces. Now I'm going to take a centerpiece just so I can look underneath it and see what's at the bottom. There we go. Okay. Do you see how the bottom is clean? Do you see this? Do you see how there's no like liquid? How many times you've been to a party or somebody's house or whatever, and there's liquid in the bottom of the pan? What we did with this was we cooked this for so long, and we got all the excess liquid out of there, so there's no liquid in here. It's just flavor, okay? You're not got a big soupy mess in here. It's all cooked properly. So this is what it looks like. I'll slide it into the camera view here so you can take a look. And we should give it a try, right? We should try it out, see what it tastes like. All right, we can see it's together. It's one piece. Looks creamy, looks cheesy. There's meat in there. Smells good. That is perfectly cooked. Not only are the noodles perfectly cooked, but there is the layers in there of the cheesy, creamy, then really well-seasoned, well-cooked, and really just robust flavor of that Ragu all melds together so well. This is an excellent lasagna. Really just wonderful. Yeah, and the extra steps that we took to reduce that liquid down every time, the milk, the wine, the water that's inside the vegetables, all that just concentrated all that flavor. So it's just got a ton of flavor. It's really flavorful, delicious, and it's got all those wonderful notes of that creaminess and that richness that we added with the bechamel. Noodles are cooked perfectly. This is it's time consuming, but it's certainly not the most time consuming lasagna you can make. And you can kind of do other stuff while it's going, right? You can just walk away from it while it's sort of removing all that water and you're burning all that liquid out of everything. You can sort of walk away from it a little bit. And it is just, I think this is an absolutely wonderful version of a lasagna bolognese. I hope you give this a try and I hope you enjoy it. Please like, share, subscribe, help the channel grow. Catch you next time. Season liberally.